Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm your host, Sam, and I am thrilled to be joined once again by the writing duo extraordinary, Benjamin Raab and Deric Hughes. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Deric, how are you?
Dry. It's a rainy day. So once again in Southern California, which is also a rarity. But other than that, I'm happy to be here. That's my
Fantastic.
that's my canned weather response. Let's start off with that.
And
Yep.
I appreciate that. There are some podcasts that I listen to that they always do a weather report check-in because they're all from different areas, in the
Right.
country. So I appreciate the weather check-in.
Well, you're gonna
Ben,
be
how are
so
you?
disappointed about Ben's response then.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the weather. I mean, there's really no point. Mentally, I'm okay. Physically, I think I'm all right. I mean, I'm taking all the required medications that my doctor's prescribed, so I'm feeling pretty healthy.
Excellent. I mean, any morning you can get up and, be above ground and make sure you're, doing the right things to take care of yourself. It's not a bad thing.
Yes.
The weather here in Chicago is good. I'll just add, it had been pretty cold the past couple of days. Today we got up to about 50, so I was able to go on a nice little walk with the family before dinner. So that was nice. So we were dry. I apologize. I'm sure we'll get some of that moisture at some point soon, and it'll probably be snow. So you can be thankful that you're not going to get, a couple of feet of snow dumped on you like we did a few weeks back. So at least there's that.
My daughter's there for college, and she's having her first experiences of real winter.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that was interesting, especially because in the city, it was a little different than it was in the burbs. They got a lot of like ice, whereas because this weird thing happened where the lake stayed warmer, where generally, there's that lake effect snow and the lake gets colder and that sort of stuff. But for whatever reason, probably, climate change, the lake was warmer this time around. So instead of getting all of the snow that like the Chicago land area got, they got a lot of ice in the city. So that had to have been interesting. But anyway, from ice to fire, we are here to talk about As the World Burns. I know, right? That was pretty good, wasn't it? And I'm so excited to I'm so excited to talk
Was that
about
in
this
your
episode.
is that in your Kindle? Like you had that one circled?
I know, it is at the top, but it wasn't necessarily perfectly planned. I have to say that this is one of my favorite episodes of the season, and it's one of my favorite episodes that you guys have written. I've loved a number of episodes. Well, I mean, all of the episodes pretty much that you guys have written, and this one just felt so momentous in a lot of ways, obviously, because it started to really drive home a lot of the stuff that was going to be resolved in the finale, and it's such a perfect companion to that finale episode. So I can't wait to talk about it. But seriously, kudos, because I just really, really loved it. And I think that a lot of viewers are going to feel the same way. And it's that perfect kind of first hour, since they're going to be aired back to back to this 2-hour event that people have been witness to as they'll now be able to watch and listen to this. So the first thing that I wanted to start off with actually was to talk about one of the characters in the episode, and that's of course the character of Jeffrey. And we see Jeffrey obviously very early in the episode, but at the risk of being too linear, we can jump all over the place with this one, because I feel like the introduction that we got to the character in Off the Cuff is he's in a very, very different place now, for a lot of reasons. So Deric, I'll go ahead and start with you. Can you talk about writing Jeffrey in this episode and just what the bigger picture was like in the writer's room and the discussion of the character, getting ready to kind of set up some of the big stuff that's coming over the course of not only this episode but also in the finale?
Sure. I mean, we'll start off with the fact that we and all the writers, credit to everyone, as because we were coming off of a 7-month, sort of there's a little something that happened last year, in Hollywood, where it was a kind of a little, tiny little shutdown that really affected like lots and lots of people.
Yeah.
And but we were fortunate enough in that time when we came back that because we kind of used that to our advantage, because we had some time off, that we were able to revisit all the episodes, all the stories. Like the first day back, we Martin and gathered Martin and Dean gathered all of us together, and we were just like, oh, we really need to start figuring some things out, including Jeffrey. It's like, how does Jeffrey factor into this? How is it going to play? How is it going to lead up to where we need him to be, especially when the reveal of who Jeffrey turns out to be, right? And so that's in itself was like the fun, trying to figure it all that stuff out. As far as like writing him, yeah, it was kind of it was tricky because again, it was like there was two Jeffreys that you had to write, that was and emotionally where the character was at one point in their life, and then when we see him again now in our episode, like where is he, and all the impact of like what Ben set in motion, right? And what Ben tried to prevent in trying to help save one life, he inadvertently, destroyed another person, another person's life. Or in this case, Jeffrey, that's Jeffrey's POV, right? Of like,
sure,
this person's, solely responsible for destroying my life and my connection, my love, with my father. And so and then puts him on that dark path. And so when we sat down, we were just like, okay, we had to keep, make sure that we keep track of that. And that was a bit of a trick, especially when at the same time, you won't know really if it's going to work until who you end up casting. If it's like, because that's the other part of the equation of like who you cast. And, we were very fortunate and lucky to get who we got, is like in that way. So that's where I think it was just for, in the writing of it, it was just more of it was a constant sort of like calibration of like trying to figure out, how this is going to, pay off in the way that you needed to pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it certainly does. Ben, kind of the same question, just the approach to the character as a whole, but also to add another layer to that. I mean, you're writing this character who is obviously struggling with all of this grief, but not just a character struggling with grief, but an 11-year-old boy, struggling with having lost his father. Can you talk a little bit about the approach to that as well as the character overall?
Well, I mean, we wanted to, make it as real and credible and believable as we possibly could. The emotions of an 11-year-old can manifest in a host of different ways. And so part of, what we wanted for Jeffrey specifically was, well, Jeffrey's he's not your average 11-year-old kid. This kid is there's something extra about him that comes from his mother. He is definitely Hannah's son. And, in Off the Cuff, we see the elements of how similar they are. Like, when they're talking about cooking and he knows the little, the scientific side of cooking, right? Yeah. The science of gastronomy speaks to that this is a kid who has an intellectual level that is different than other kids. And we kind of felt like, well, but what if his emotional level isn't? What if his emotional level is a little bit more in the pocket of an 11-year-old? Just because you're, intellectually playing on a different plane than your peers doesn't mean you don't feel and hurt like they do. So the trick was sort of threading that needle, figuring out how to do it in a way that, when he lashes out, you don't want the audience to be like, oh, this kid's a pain in the ass. You want the audience to really sympathize with him and kind of, feel what he's going through. And I think, Wyatt, the actor that played Jeffrey in 12, was
Wyatt Parker.
Yeah. He brought a great point of view to Jeffrey at that age that, really served our episode well. We had some fun. There were some fun moments on set where Pamela gave him some direction, and Derek and I were sitting there in the village, and we heard how he was acting, and like what he was saying, and we're like, we didn't write that. His mother standing right there. I mean, he's like, she was trying to get him into the emotional state of a moment in one scene, and she was like, and he says,
yeah,
we have to believe it, but he says to Ben, he's like, "Fuck you," and we're like, "Whoa, where did that come from?"
Yeah,
and his mom's standing right behind us, and I'm like,
all right,
it wasn't us. It wasn't us.
It wasn't us.
But shout out and props to Pamela because as our director, was like able to to sort of like you get a character so far on the page, and then the actor, in this case Wyatt, will get the character another step on the page. Then Pamela, as the director, is saying, okay, now I need you to really dig in and bring it here, where you were here, I needed to be here, and so
Yeah.
it's like, and being able to work with an actor in that capacity. And I think that's where it was just, again, that's where it really fleshes out the character that you envision, that you hope that will leap off the page and you'll be able to see that way on screen. It's like, but it, sometimes you don't get you don't get that you don't get that fortune of having someone be able to do that. And we're very lucky in such a way that it just all works out, and you
Yeah, I
can
hope
see it
those moments end up on
with
the
that.
blooper reel. That would be kind of cool for the season 2 DVD set. If you see, young
I mean,
Jeffrey bursting
I'd be
out,
happy with that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, Wyatt does a wonderful job, and I love what you were just saying too, Derek, about just the that getting that fusion right of the writing and the actor and the director, and of course you can go on and on, right? You can talk about
Mm-hmm.
everybody from the cinematographer to the wardrobe to the editors, obviously, but really when you just think about that specific collaboration between the writing, the acting, and the directing, it feels like with this episode in particular that there was so much synergy between those three things. And obviously Jeffrey is a great example of that, but I also think that Ben and Hannah, and specifically the scene that I just am going to jump to, because like I said, why do we need to go chronologically, is the scene between Addison and Hannah, which is just brilliant. I mean that genuinely. I think it is so perfect in every way. And I loved so much about just the dynamic of that scene, and then obviously, of course, the conceit that Hannah cannot see or hear Addison, but they're still in conversation with one another in this really wonderful way. Ben, can you talk about the scripting of that scene and just kind of how that scene might have appeared, in your heads or in the writers' room, collective heads or whatever, as far as what that scene meant and where that came from?
Yeah, I mean, when Derek and I were, had to sort of go off and think about, like, okay, when we talk about this and breaking this tomorrow in the room, what are some of the things we want to see? And that was kind of high up on our list, was to see a moment where the two loves of Ben's life get to be in a scene with each other, even if they can't even if they can't hear each other or actually interact with each other, that they are sharing a moment together. It felt like in a weird way, that was a set piece of story that we were really excited to do. We were lucky in that we have two amazing actors in Caitlin and in Eliza that just under the circumstances. I mean, poor Eliza was covered in all the debris for like hours, laying on a pad under all that, all the set decking and props and stuff, and she was such a trooper, and brought so much pathos and emotion to that moment. And we got to watch them bond. We got to watch these two, incredibly strong, powerful women have forgetting the Ben of it all. Yes, it was subtextually, sure, Ben is present in that scene for both of them, but really it was about the two of them being there for each other, and Hannah trying to complete her equation, Addison trying to make sure that nothing terrible happens to her before it's too late, until Ben can get back. So it's very gratifying that you responded to that scene, because that scene did mean a lot to us to write.
Yeah.
And it was like the culmination of the journey of the two characters. This was sort of like, if you're talking about like a relay race, of like the baton was handed off at the beginning of the season to Eliza to be, Ben's sort of new love and a connection. And then, through this whole season, going through the journey of those two together, but then handing the baton back to Addison. It's like, in a way of like, you are meant to be. It's like, I got you, I got you this far, but now I'm handing the baton back to you because you're the one that's supposed to be carrying this. This is your journey now, right? It's like my journey is complete, or my journey is coming to an end, but your journey is just beginning in that fun way. And so the two of them, and again, it's like, yeah, just having the interaction between the two, and the mutual respect for one another. And, Ben being sort of like that focal point, but not that focal point. It's like, again, as Ben pointed out, it's like, because it was more than just about Ben's song at this moment, right? And so that's, and it's like one thing to think of it in your head, and it's like, but it's another thing to watch it unfold, when you're there on the set and you're watching these two performances and stuff. And then both actors understanding that, because, they've lived with these characters, and then now they're like, okay, now it's time to really bring it in this moment. Right. And like,
Yeah.
and land that moment. And so again, can't praise Pamela enough. It's like also with Pamela, just really sort of like getting them there, and and really sort of like letting that moment be a moment. Because that's the other thing too. Because it could be, it was very tricky, especially in the time crunch that we had on this episode, where we we hit the ground running, and we had to figure out, like, we had to build sets really quickly, and just just try to cram everything as much as possible, because then on top of that, it's like the minute that we finished shooting this, then it was like going right into post, like with our editors, and working really fast, because this all airs tomorrow night. It's just
right.
This is like this time, what would we say, about 5 weeks ago, Ben, we were wrapping this up now.
Yeah, I guess so, roughly
5 or 6 weeks ago. Yeah, I mean, it was it's it's really crazy how fast that all works. But yeah, so
Yeah.
but so then sometimes you have to make these sacrifices and scenes and stuff like that, but this was a very important scene, and so allowing that scene to be a scene, it's like, it's really a moment is really nice to see.
Yeah. Well, one
That
of the
scene
things
is
that's
also
remarkable.
just
No,
one
go
thing to
ahead,
add
Ben.
is, like in the Caitlin, in the Addison journey of it all, in the back half of the season, her journey of taking back some of the agency that was taken away from her, in our pilot, and sort of, figuring out what it is that she wants and what she's going to do, and sort of Hannah's example providing a reinforcement for the choice that she's, subconsciously. It's not like a conscious thing in
Yeah,
the moment. 12, she doesn't know what's going to happen in 13. We know as
Yeah.
writers what's going to happen in 13 and how this services it. But given the
yeah.
choice she makes in 13, which audiences will probably have seen by this point, I hope.
Yeah. I think we could
You
definitely
have. I
talk
know
about
you have.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like,
So
when is this going to air? I was like, that's why I feel like I'm like dancing around. Like, I don't want to spoil anything, because I'm feeling like this is going to come out before the episodes, but it's not. There's no way in the
But it's
world.
not right.
Not.
Right.
But
but
so I'm being cautious about how I'm speaking around things. But then I'm like, oh wait, if by the time this comes out, everybody will have seen it, or most people will have seen it. That are tuning into this podcast. Yeah,
but that
it's
scene is a key stepping stone moment. It's I think it's the final moment that kind of helps play into her headspace for 13, and so that when she gets to that moment of choice, she takes the action that she does.
Yeah, I've
Well,
realized Addison is more than just the hologram, more than just Ben's love interest. It's like she has her purpose and her journey, and like what, again, she was the original, candidate to do to do the leaping. So
yeah.
it was nice, because of like the fallout with Tom, like where that relationship came to an end, and her realizing, like, I'm not doing this for Ben, I'm not doing, I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing this because I know I need to go. I need to push myself further and go, in a direction that I've been holding back on. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and throw this out there right now. If someone is listening or watching this in the future, say that you're watching on Peacock for the first time, for instance, or you've got the Blu-rays and you're watching those for the first time, and you stopped after, As the World Burns, and you rushed out and you're listening to all the podcasts or whatever, and you're listening to this now, this will be your final opportunity to step off the train, because we are definitely going to go full spoilers for Against Time, which is the finale, because we have this really unique opportunity to be able to talk with you guys about kind of the the full scope of some of the stuff that's happening, and I really want to have the chance to do that, and sure, maybe we could do that another time, but I feel like we've got the chance to do it now, especially while it's kind of fresh. So we might as well do it. So that's your warning for anyone watching or listening in the future that hasn't yet seen Against Time. Go check out Against Time, then come back and watch this and all the other stuff, the interview with Dean and Drew as well, which I really enjoyed, and got a lot of great information about that stuff. But as it pertains to this episode and knowing kind of where things are going, one of the things that was remarkable to me, especially about Caitlin's performance and the way that Addison is written in general, is that it became very clear to me, kind of over the course of this episode. And then I took a break, actually between As the World Burns and Against Time, so I could just sit with it for a little while. I didn't go straight into it, which is not necessarily the experience that people who are watching live will get to have, quite frankly. But in that break, one of the things that I couldn't help but think about is that for the character of Addison, especially since coming back from the break, and it really started in The Family Treasure in 210, we really start to see her not only maybe reconnecting to her feelings for Ben, but basically reconnecting to herself. And I think recognizing that part of who she is indeed connected to this other human being. And Hannah says it plainly, right? That some bonds can get stretched, but they'll always come back together. And that does represent their relationship. But to take it even a step further, she might have been the original candidate to leap, but I firmly believe that until Against Time, she is not ready to be a leaper. And I think that there's this beautiful progression and arc of the character that by the time we get to the end of Against Time, it's like, oh yeah, she's ready to go out there and do it. And in some ways has an advantage over Sam or Ben, because she has all that training, she has all that intent, all that purpose, but now she also knows what it is to really do this thing. It's not a theoretical, it's not an accident. It's like she can really go out there and really affect change for the better. So in kind of trying to prepare the character for that journey and prepare for getting these two people back together in some fashion, what kind of thought went into that? And when you're kind of crafting this story, and you mentioned kind of having that scene between Addison and Hannah towards the top of your list, I'm just curious what other elements for Addison there were to kind of help build on and start to complete this arc for the character that we've seen, not really even just for the past 5 episodes, not even for the past 13 episodes, but arguably for the past 30 plus episodes, stretching back to the premiere.
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Well, if you want me to start, I mean, I think if anything, it's like you said, it's like the question has always been there, of like, especially in the writers room for us, it's like, again, it's like, it's always, it will pop up when we're breaking an episode, and just like when we're trying to figure out like what's Addison doing this time, where is she, and you want to keep track, and the further, the more you go along into a season, right, and it's just sort of like, okay, where are each characters? In its case, for Addison's character, it was like we knew early on, kind of like, okay, we want to get her here, like, didn't know exactly if she was going to, like what the ending was going to be, but definitely, again, like, where is she going to step up? Like, what's that next level where, in that way of that change that you want to see happen with your characters, right? So I don't know if there was a particular moment in place where but I think it was like it sort of like coalesced in a way when we were, maybe, I don't know, it was, I want to say, right before the strike, that we had the conversation in the room, and then someone, I forgot who it was, that brought it up about, like, because we were talking about the relationship between Addison and Tom, and what's that really mean, and what are we trying to do here? And it was what we landed on was like, well, it's never been about Tom, and even though the relationship with her and Ben, we're not trying to basically spend our time trying to make it be about Ben getting back to Addison, Ben and them back together, right? Even though they are, like you said, intertwined, right? They have that connection, but what does it really mean now for her as a character by herself? And so I think it was just more or less, again, it was like by the time that we got to these last 2 episodes, and like with Drew Lindo, our 7'1" tall, amazing fellow co-EP. Every time I talk about him, I want to add another inch. It's like he just gets taller. Like, it was very much a decision, sort of like, okay, now what? Where do we go from here? Right? It's like, if we're going to pay, how are we going to pay this off? What's the best way to pay this off? And so, by the time that she steps into the accelerator, it's like, who is she and why is she the right person to do this, right? So that the
Yeah.
spark was already ignited. I mean, it was, it was already there. It was just like, where did those, where did the flames? And I think it was like, for our episode, very much so, like, this is where it really was lit, right? And this conversation between her and Eliza, is like with Caitlin again. Also, Caitlin being very, I think, and I say this a lot, and I share this with a lot of my friends. I said we're so fortunate to have work with actors who really care about their characters and really want, and want to be protective of their characters. And so that also, so you have those conversations, and you've very much been able to help better shape them. Because you want your actors to be happy with what you write and create. It's like, and have and fun. So their input is just as invaluable as anyone else's. And again, they have that collaborative, sort of that sort of like access is always been great. So that for this, for Addison to get to where she is, like I said, yes, you're right. It's like over 30 episodes of like looking back and saying like, what are we really trying to say here? And then so like when it finally came together, like that light bulb moment, you're like, oh yes, how cool would this be? It's like,
Yeah.
and then to have that surprise at the end.
I mean,
Yes.
it's something even in season 1, we wanted to see something like that. We
Yeah.
couldn't justify it. It was something that we needed to earn it, right? If you're going to do something like that, you've really got to earn it, even though it is baked into the DNA of the character, the DNA of the show, what the program was supposed to be in this new iteration. But the timing for that kind of thing to happen was just not right. And this was the season that, as the story unfolded, it was like, nope, this is the time to do it. And the minute we hit on the notion of the way to get Ben home is to swap places, is a swap code, that suddenly opened the floodgates to allow this possibility and have it be earned, story-based, character-based, and very emotional at the same time.
And then as Addison being the character that understands sacrifice. Again, former military, understanding what the cost of sacrifice, and not without a second's hesitation to saying like, I'm the one to do this. It's not even so much for the love. It's like, but this is I'm the only one that can do this, right? It's
and the other side of it is, he did this for me.
Yeah.
So if the moment's going to come where someone's going to have to make that choice, I'm doing it for him.
Yeah, and I think that I want to add even more into this, because everything that you said about it being character driven, it blossoms out even beyond Addison, right? Like, I think that obviously her story ultimately, especially by the time we get to end of 213, is so incredibly important to the fabric of all of this. And it does feel like this, almost like this superhero origin story, over the course of these last 2 seasons, and prepping her and getting her ready for this. And Ben as well, quite frankly, which that final image that we see at the end of Against Time is so powerful for that very reason, because it's just sort of like they're running towards the fire, which connects nicely with this episode because he's in a fire. But to step away from the flames for a moment, I actually want to take a look at some of the project side of stuff, because I feel like there's some stuff that gets set up again in this episode for these characters and for the choices that these people are willing to make and how far they're willing to go in order to protect this project, in order to, potentially get Ben back home, whatever the case might be, that are again, paid off in Against Time so well. And they're set up beautifully here. And specifically, I want to talk about Magic and Jen, because at the end of The Outsider, Magic says, I'm going to serve myself up on a platter so that nobody else has to take the fall for this. And we learn through the course of this episode that part of what he has in mind is to leave Jen in charge, which is wonderful, because I feel like Jen, she's had some good stuff, don't get me wrong. I mean, even like, for instance, in your guys' last episode, One Night in Koreatown, she has that beautiful scene with Magic. But at the same time, I feel like she hasn't necessarily had a big role until these last 2 episodes. And in these last 2 episodes, she just gets some amazing stuff to do. And of course, Narissa's more than up to the task. Can you talk a little bit about those dynamics, in particular between the two of them, and also how that feeds into that so much of this character-driven story as it pertains to what's happening back at HQ? Ben, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, no, we love Nanrissa, and any opportunity to give her something to chew on, she always does an amazing job. Which is why we were very excited to give her in this story the opportunity to step up and be the one in charge, despite her origins, right? Given the fact that this is an ex-con. I mean, yes, it is highly unlikely that the government is going to trust this multi-billion-dollar, science project to an ex-con. However,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I would have said that maybe about 10 years ago. I
don't know. It's possible now. But as to sort of demonstrate the level of faith that Magic, her surrogate father, has in her, that yes, I will fall upon my sword, but you're going to do this because it is the right thing for this project, was great. And it just gave us a chance to show what Jen's range is within the context of Quantum Leap, that she has leadership qualities that she's never really gotten the chance to explore. If we're lucky enough to get a season 3, maybe we'll get to see more of that. I don't know. I mean, that would be nice, because Jen is an integral part of our team. She's not just security. She is, she's sort of like the entire infrastructure of Quantum Leap. That the non-science part of it, that's all her.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, due to the limitations of telling stories in 1 hour format on network television, which basically comes down to 42 minutes of network storytelling, there are a lot of stories for every character that we exist here and in the writers' room on the board, that you will never see the light of day, or at least in the during the course of a season. Like, we'll start out grandiose with we want to see these characters have this stuff and doing all this stuff, and we're lucky, we're able to grab those nuggets, those moments like this, where it's just again, it's especially the relationship between Magic and Jen, the bond that they have, that father-daughter, the love for one another, in a way that really is sort of again, her journey to get to this moment of really stepping in, and the only one capable of stepping into Magic's shoes, right? It's it's those are big shoes to fill, and Magic believes no, you are the one. There's no doubt in my mind. I could have got anyone, but you are the one that will be able to to keep this this program up and running while I'm gone. It's I believe in you, and it's but that for Jen, for her to have to come to sort of those terms and look inward and start believing in herself, because she's the one that's always sort of waiting for that other shoe to drop, because of the nature of her background and her history of where she came from and how she's so we it's again, with Nanrissa being able to sort of always when it's there's always something, the wheels are always turning in Jen's mind, in that way of looking at things in ways that other people aren't looking at them, because that's why Magic brought her on, right? It's this is you're going to watch my back, and then she not only watch her back, but then in turn she watch everyone else's back, and then she ends up becoming the one that's going to watch all of Quantum Leap. So that was the fun of being able to do that and get that out there in that way.
Yeah, well, and it informs so well, I think, the sacrifice that Jen then makes in the next episode and Against Time, and it's Magic kind of imparts that lesson to her in a way, and I think that it's baked into, as you kind of mentioned earlier, it's baked into the DNA of the character already, but this, I think, certainly kind of affirms that, and it's really lovely the way that it plays out. And of course, I also, we're talking about some of this heavier stuff. I'd love to, and I'll start with you, Derek, but it provides us with some humor as well. The exchange between Magic and Jen. with everything that's happening and going on, especially this deep into the season, and there's so much, just big stuff for these characters that's coming and that happens in this episode. How do you still keep the humor? Because there's definitely some really wonderful moments of humor in the episode. I mean, even the fact that, like, when Ben and Jeffrey are getting ready to escape the fire, Ben walks out into the hallway and it's like, we can't go this way, and it's like there are these wonderful little moments of humor, and not losing that while everything else is burning to the ground around them.
Because it's Quantum Leap. I mean, it's like, that's the nature of the show. We're just continuing the tradition of that. You want to have the heart, the humor. It's like really, it would be so the episode would be so dour if you didn't have those moments, right? And you just have to you have to understand, like, when to time those moments. You don't want to. The last thing you want to do is, like, between Hannah and Addison, and then have a jokey joke moment, right? It's like, I'm dying, Addison, but it's like, but at least I'm looking good, it just, like, that would just take you out, right? So you have to be able to, like, where are your moments of levity, where are the moments of, like, or that organic humor that doesn't feel forced, or that you're just, like, trying to set up joke type of thing, right? And then so when you're able to have fun actors like Ernie and Mason, and Narissa, it's like, especially in the HQ scenes, right? It's like they already have such chemistry to begin with. It's very easy to write those moments and have that sort of thing, right? And it's like, so it's just comes, like, we get to sort of pick and choose, like, okay, where would we like to see just a moment of, like, a little bit of a crack a smile, have a moment of fun as you're going through this sort of thing. But again, it's just sort of like, how do you calibrate that and make sure that it doesn't overstep or overshadow anything that you should be paying attention to as a viewer, and as telling a story. So right. But it varies from episode to episode. That's the thing, the nature of being able to write different type of stories every single episode, of not just having it just be on the tracks of the same type of story from beginning, middle to end, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's remarkable too. Just in the when you look at the episodes that the pair of you've written, you've got to do a western, a medical drama, a historical, and now a towering inferno, right? And yet the thing that's kind of remarkable about all of those episodes, but I think in some ways even more so about this one, is how incredibly character driven it is, and I think that those moments of humor help inform that as well. One of the moments that I thought was very amusing is that as Ian and Jen are seeing Hannah write out the formula in the ashes, like, their reactions are just so fun and so alive, and obviously that is in part just, I mean, Narissa and Mason being awesome, right? But like in writing that scene, I think it's remarkable the times where I have enjoyed those types of scenes over the course of this season, especially where we're getting something happening within the leap, and then we're seeing the reactions back at HQ and just how well they inform one another. It feels to me like that might actually be kind of one of those sort of light bulb moments as a room, figuring that out, because it's not something that we necessarily saw used as much or in the same way in the first season. So I'm curious, and Ben, I'll go ahead and pose this to you, like, doing those types of scenes and being able to have that kind of synergy between the present day and the leap story. How do you do that? What goes into that? And again, how do you craft it in such a way that you've got that rich contrast between, again, like, Hannah's lying on the ground potentially in this life or death situation, and then back at the team, you're still able to find that hope and humor, with all of that going on.
I mean, sometimes, I mean, like in this specific instance, I will say, we absolutely had to lean into it. Like, this was penultimate episode, even though it was, not originally meant to be a 2-night event. We thought we'd have that week.
Right.
But for the story, we always knew this is going to set up our finale. So we have to do everything we can to write a scenario where you've got an A story and a B story, but they're kind of the same story. And what we had the good fortune of nobody having figured out that code yet in a previous episode.
Right,
so we're
right.
like, cool,
Yeah.
we'll do that. We'll plant whatever seeds Drew's going to need for his episode, but at least we get to carry that sort of, that plot point that's been, we've been, tossing the balls, downfield. Now it's our turn to really run it down that field to get it to its scoring position. And I think, being able to, like I said, have that specific plot detail that allowed us to give our characters a moment of win while all this horrible shit's happening in the A story. We're getting this win that's, that they've been waiting, weeks for, episodes for, and they finally crack it. And it's like, you balance the drama and the potential tragedy and the tension with the joy. It's inevitable. Of course, it's going to go hand in hand. It's going to work really well. The other thing, when you said this is a very character-driven episode, I mean, the plot element, and again, fortunate enough to be the penultimate episode where you don't have to solve everything, but you get to take advantage of everything that's come before, is the fact that we got to set this as the last leap between Ben and Hannah, knowing that was going to be this story.
Yeah.
Was that all other good things sprang from that fertile soil, because that was right away. We knew, what part of the journey we're telling the ending. And so how can we, in the context of a Towering Inferno story, which, we were very grateful when we pitched it, that both Martin and Dean weren't like, you're fucking crazy, there's no way you can do it. They were like, absolutely, let's figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And props to them and to our production team for really like moving mountains to make this story happen. So grateful for that.
Our production team, our stunt team. I mean, we were setting things on fire, man, with our stunt team being right next to the fire or in the fire. It's like,
but we had that. So we had all those elements in front of us. So it made it very easy, to get back to your question, to write a story where the leap and the headquarters stories, were interwoven. Other times it's a little bit more challenging, because we know that very often our headquarters stories carry whatever mythology, plot mythology we're going to want to use. And sometimes, it moves things incrementally. You don't take big leaps, but within the context of those stories, you get nice character development moments where you get to know, Ian and Jen and Magic better. And, we fall in love with them a little bit more every time we do that. Yeah. So, and sometimes, again, it's deeply woven into the A story, and sometimes it's tangential. You got to, you find a balance, but at the end of the day, you use those opportunities to get to the ones where you can weave them together, like we got to do in these last two episodes.
Yeah. I mean, and it's incredible too, because the episode, I feel like it stands so well on its own. I just enjoy it as this singular episode. So there is that element of like, oh, what would this have been like if there had been 1 week for 212 and 1 week for 213 instead of having both of them together. And yet it is obviously completely inseparable from the fabric of the rest of the season, and especially from what happens in Against Time. So, you mentioned Hannah and the last leap between Ben and Hannah. I would love to just hear more about your thoughts on that and crafting that, and because almost more so than any other episode, I mean, obviously, I think Secret History, mostly Nomad, definitely, I think even more than Secret History in some ways, but I think in some ways, As the World Burns might be more of a Ben and Hannah episode than even those two episodes were in some ways. So in doing kind of the last leap, and having the two of them together in this way, I would just love to know more about your thoughts on that. And then I'll also throw one specific question out there. Was there ever a plan or ever a thought in your all's mind about, because it gets pushed so close to the edge, about actually having Hannah die in the episode as opposed to making it out alive? Whoever wants to go first.
No, I don't think there was. I mean, I think it's like Eliza is just so wonderful and amazing. It was such a joy. And again, it was just like, again, we really lucked out in that way of like finding somebody that really brought that magic of what, the character needed and also for the relationship for Ben over the course of this season. I don't, and I think we also didn't want to have the trope of killing someone like that, right? That's like that was very early on. It was like, no, let's not go down that road unless it actually is something that, but you don't want to have that sacrifice in that way of like, why? It's like there's so many other ways to tell that story, and thankfully we didn't really ever entertain that. I don't think that was ever a serious conversation about should we kill her off or not.
I feared for her. I mean, so congratulations though, because I think that in this day and age where like terms like plot armor and et cetera, get thrown around the internet and all that sort of stuff, like I genuinely was, afraid that this was going to happen. And so much so to the point that I actually mentioned it on the last episode of the podcast. I was like, I think Hannah might die in the next episode.
Well,
so
we want our viewers to think that.
Of course, I mean, right.
You want to make sure, you never want to make it feel like that, oh, this character, you never have to be worried about this character, especially if you do the job right, as the writers. It's like you want to make sure that you have invested and been on this journey with this character and care about this character as much as as we do, and you want to be like concerned, like, oh man, what if they don't make it, but you don't want to also do the head fake of like, it's like, no, it should be more about like, I don't know if she's gonna make it or not. That's if you do it right versus of like, oh, she's gonna walk out of this fine. It's like, right, I don't know, she might not. It's it's because it's like fun seeing how audiences, like fans, thinking about like, oh, what if that formula does this? It's like, I think there was a couple of people that reached out, like one in particular reached out to Ben, a mutual friend of ours, that said like, I think I know what this is, and he did. He figured it out. Also, he's a writer. He's a very, very talented writer, and so
the best part was,
but also a fan, and that's important too.
Yeah.
Fan of the original, fan of us. Like he loves both shows, and the fact that our episode is the one where he's like, when I'm proven right, you can buy me dinner. I'm like, all right, well, I guess our episode's where we prove you right.
Do we give him a shout out? Do we reveal who it is?
No.
Okay.
Let him have his anonymity.
Yeah, we'll give his anonymity. But if he's listening to this, then he knows that we owe him. Yeah. And speaking of a quick shout out, wanted to say also for any fledgling quantum physicists out there, or just in general, the formula, Hannah's formula, is as real as you can get. I mean, it's pretty real in a way of, because I'm on what's called the Science and Entertainment Exchange Committee, part of that, which is part of the National Academy of Sciences, and what they do is they pair up anybody that works in the industry with like scientists and anybody, any science related based type of consulting that you might need as a storyteller. And in this case, fortunate enough, we reached out to my buddy Rick Lovert, who runs the program, and he was like, I said, we need a quantum physicist for time travel. And he was like, what about Spiros? And I was like, oh yeah, I knew it was Spiros Michalakis, he's at Caltech in quantum information and matter, and he was the one that created that formula that you see on Ian's board, and then Hannah, basically, which is Hannah's equation. And so, like what Ben was saying, like, being fortunate enough that, because we were like, wait, does the formula exist or not? And then once we found out it did, we were like, okay, let's run with this. And so I, talked to him and said like, hey man, look, this is what we need. We need an existing formula. And he goes, well, I already got one. All right, I've been working on it. And we were like, wait, what? He's like, oh yeah, I got a time travel equation, dude. And we were like, okay. And so he put the whole thing up. And then on top of that, we were like, well, we need the missing component that Hannah's going to basically scrawl in the floor, and he was able to craft that as well. And then that's all his work there that you're seeing there. So if there's any quantum aspiring time travel aficionados that are looking to try to crack it themselves, you might want to start there. It was fun too. Also, it was like watching Ben get his mind scrambled talking.
Yeah, no, he was on set with us when we were shooting those scenes, and he was in between takes. He was explaining things to me, and I was like, "I'm a lower order of primate. You're really like." I'm sorry, I haven't evolved to whatever level you are at. So please stop breaking my brain because it's starting to hurt. I've got to watch this scene.
That's fantastic. I love that so much. And when the Tomita Takasaki principle was dropped, it I immediately went and looked that up and started reading, and even reading it, my brain started to get broken. So I can only imagine what it would be like to have an expert standing next to you, articulate this. So Ben, yeah, I mean, kind of a similar question, but I mean, yeah, the approach overall to crafting this leap for Hannah and Ben, and we've talked a bit about Hannah already, obviously, but I think specific to this episode and to where she is and to what the leap means from her side of things, can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the end of the love story, right? So it's the day they both knew was going to come. Didn't know when, didn't know how, didn't know what scenario. And for them to find themselves in that scenario at a time where she's struggling. She's struggling with her son, struggling to make ends meet. She's a single mother at this point. In 1974, it's maybe not so easy. And, she's working on this big project, which she knows, the audience doesn't know, is for Ben's sake, is to try and help him, is to try and get him home. Whatever home may be, whatever the definition of home is, which we cover in these two episodes. And, so there's, she's living her life, and then all of a sudden he's there in it again. All the math has said this is going to be the end. We're not going to, see each other again. So it's goodbye. So she comes in. So his arrival, the minute she realizes that firefighter is Ben's song, it all kind of comes crashing down for her in a lot of ways, because she hasn't solved the equation. She hasn't figured it out. She's not done. And she's never going to see him after this is over. When he saves whatever lives he's here to save, it's goodbye forever. And the fun of this episode, because we had, the luxury of being able to tell the end of that story, that last leap together, meant it could actually be about her in a way, a little bit more directly than some of those other leaps were.
Yeah.
It still technically was about her, but it was really more about Jeffrey in some ways. It was about getting the two of them back together, and reuniting mother and son emotionally, reconnecting them emotionally. And, right, because, Ben's leap host died in a fire trying to save, 4 construction workers. He pulls that off early, but story's not over yet, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why, another reason why I think, I'm glad that you felt that sense of, okay, are they really going to kill Hannah? Was because we put him in that scenario where it was, you have to pick one of two people to save, and it's either the kid or his mother. It's going to be, Jeffrey or Hannah. Who are you going to choose? That's an impossible choice for Ben Song to have to make, knowing that he loses the love of his life, or the love of his life loses the love of her life.
Yeah.
And what do? I have to do what she wants me to do. And that ultimately turned out to be the right choice for him. So, it was great to be able to just sort of tell the story of their love ending with this triumph, right? That in figuring out multiple triumphs, realizing what it is missing from the equation, the X factor that she couldn't quite solve, his presence, their conversations about love and its timelessness are what led to her being able to solve that equation, which then gives our team the means that they need to figure out how to get Ben home. Meanwhile, Ben is saving Jeffrey and still managing to save Hannah as well, despite all the odds, because he's a hero and, he's the best. So, I mean, it's a great way to for us to go out for the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that the other thing that and you can't write to a theme. Like I understand you can, but it generally doesn't work out very well. But I think that one of the themes of this season, of course, has been the nature of sacrifice. And themes of loss and grief as well, but nature of sacrifice. And I think in this episode, it's driven home due to the nature of that choice. You have to save my son. You can't save both of us. And that Hannah is willing to sacrifice herself in order to ensure that Ben, saves Jeffrey. Derek, do you want to talk a little bit about the nature of sacrifice throughout the season, of course, and again, how you kind of, you said you can't necessarily write to that, and yet at the same time, it is integral, I think, to the season, and especially these last couple of episodes.
I think it's just always sort of like not so much front of mind, but it's just there, and just also in the conversations again of like where we see the characters start out the beginning of the journey versus where they are at the end, and then what are the sacrifices that are going to come into play, who's going to make those sacrifices, are there sacrifices that need to be made, it's like, and can we find another way to do it without the sacrifice, the expected sacrifice, right? Except for the big one, which was like, that was a fun surprise for all of us to get to that point, and like, oh, we finally get to make this big sacrifice play. So I don't know if there's any sort of like one particular moment. I think it with each writer, it's like the credit to each writer of like their story as they're crafting it, and as we're breaking it in the room, what works, what doesn't work, and finding it. And again, finding it, if like making it, and also not overplaying it, because you don't want to keep going back to that well, right? Even though there's different ways to do the sacrifice, but it also comes down to it's still the sacrifice. So if you're going to make a sacrifice play, you want to make sure that it's special, or at least special to that episode, But again, you don't want to have every episode come down to like, who's the sacrifice in this one? What's the sacrifice going to be? So like for each character, it's like, because after a while it's just like, oh God, another sacrifice. Okay, here we go. Even as a viewer, if you can't articulate it, you're still sort of sitting there like saying like, why does this feel so familiar? Why does this feel like? And then it's like, is it really? Are we really gaining anything from that, right? If you keep using that over and over again. So I again, it's just sort of like, as Ben and I, when we're writing our stories of like, okay, how is the sacrifice going to play out if we're going to go, going to do that, and then you just make that determination from there. But in this case, for us, for this episode, again, business of being the penultimate episode and leading up to that, again, you want to make sure that whatever sacrifice that you might have in mind doesn't overshadow the big one, right? the big moment in such a way, or at least be distinctive enough that it's like, it doesn't feel like that it's just a repetitive step, right? So like with Hannah doing what she's doing and how she's trapped and how she feels like, I'm doing this all because it matters that, I got to make sure that Ben gets home. Like, but at the same time, it's like, she's like, this is a culmination of my life's work, but also I need to protect my kid, it's like how, but if there's a moment here in this moment of like, what's the sacrifice, is like, okay, as long as I know my kid's safe, then I'm willing to sacrifice my life to make sure that Ben is also going to be able to get safe, be able to get home, right? It's like that's sort of the choice, the Hobson's choice of that's going on there. So I think for us, it was like, as we were writing this episode, that definitely it's like, how do you thread that needle? It's like, how do you make it worth the moment that actually pays off? And I like to think that we did it this time around.
I absolutely think so. I mean, genuinely, I absolutely think so, because it comes across very powerful. And I think that one of the things that kind of helps to pay it off in a way is the scene between Ben and Jeffrey in the apartment. As Jeffrey has gone back for Josh's stuff, and it's fascinating because one of the things that looms large over this episode, and again, spoilers for anyone that is still listening at this point and hasn't seen Against Time, but Gideon's shadow looms large over this episode, and I think that we might not necessarily know that watching this episode without having seen the following episode, and yet it is so apparent, that this is clearly in a way, this is kind of like the supervillain origin story in some ways, and it's done so well because it's not anything pat or wrote, and it doesn't feel cliche. There's so much emotion involved in it, and obviously that grief in that morning. Ben, talk a little bit about writing those scenes, that scene specifically between Ben and Jeffrey. Obviously Wyatt was amazing, and Bray is always incredible. So you've got two people that are in there, and then they're going to give great work. But just the idea of putting these two people together in that room, especially knowing where things are going from here, and how you put that all together.
Well, I mean, some of the fun of that storyline was, this is where we get to see Jeffrey figure it out. This is where the pieces fall into place for him. And we are watching the moments that lead to that revelation at the end for him, which we as writers know has been bubbling for the past 50 years behind the scenes. Every time, everything that's happened in the QLB stories of the chip and the deal that Ian struck, and Rachel, and that's all the shadow of Gideon Ridge there. And then ultimately getting to, Magic's decision, Ian being busted, Magic's decision to throw himself on the sword, like all of that, we're getting to sort of see those moments at the same time that Ben is trying to save this kid's life, is trying to help this kid deal with the loss of a father, which was, another, we're all aware of Ben's feelings towards his mother's death, which gets, obviously brought up again in 13. Yeah. But here he talks about his absent father, right? Like, he says, I know what it's like to lose a father. Next episode, he's like, I didn't know him, but I know the loss. And that's the thing, is that he's trying to sort of dig into that and use that as a way to connect to this kid. And, ultimately it helps. It does, it gets him there, combined with the fact that we're in a burning building. If we don't get the fuck out of here, we're going to die. It certainly helps. But he's going to a place that, is really uncomfortable for Ben, because it is a great hole in his heart and in his life that has never been filled. And here he is trying to convince this kid that, or help him understand that it is never going to be filled, but there has to be forward momentum there. You can't stay stuck in those feelings forever. You have to move past it. You have to aspire to something else, to feel something else. And, we're lucky that it got through to Jeffrey, gets him out of danger. But it then, Derek and I were joking about this on set. We're like, we're watching those scenes, they're shooting the scenes where they're out on the ledge, and we go, if it's kind of Ben's fault, like he could have just let Jeffrey die, and then none of this Gideon Ridge stuff would have happened. And of course, that would have never happened. But it was just a moment where we're like, all right, well, so we should come past that. But then to have that moment where, which we love to be able to show the moment where he discovers it, where he opens the letter. The one thing that he managed to salvage becomes the thing that opens his eyes to what he just experienced, why he knew his mother's name, why do they seem to know each other so well, what is this connection, right? It's not just because, you're a fireman who showed up in our building because our building is prone to fires. It's because you're that fucking guy that destroyed my family.
Yeah. And it's the power, I think, of the moment of getting him out and using Josh's words, that we saw in Off the Cuff, that Josh used to Jeffrey when the bad guys are coming to the house. I mean, the choice to use those words and how that informs, what happens next for Jeffrey. And then you couple that with the letter, and you couple that with, him looking over and seeing his mom and this firefighter, that clearly there's something more there. It's so strong. And again, I think that it informs so much of what comes next in a really wonderful way. I want to get back to Gideon here in just a second, but before I do, I know you guys are comic book guys. I just have to ask, the moment with the, I'll catch you, who's gonna catch you moment, was that an intentional little nod to Superman the movie? Because all I could think as I saw that was about the scene where, he catches Lois and he's flying up.
Who's got you?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
It.
Was that intentional at all, or am I just reading into it because that's where my brain is?
I mean, you can think of it that way if you want.
Fair enough.
I would say this: it's like for Ben and I, whenever we write, we definitely sprinkle our nerd, in when we can, because the moment with Mason delivering the Wrath of Khan line,
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up.
We had so much fun with that, and then Mason, delivered, and now there was a take where Mason they go Khan, and we were like, oh, keep that moment.
That was awesome. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was another
yeah. So whenever we get a moment, where we can, we'll put a reference or two in there, slip something in if we can. Maybe sometimes not so obvious, but it is just definitely, that's just us. Like you can go look at any episode and something that we do, there will be a moment, if there was somebody on the sideline, they'd be pointing nerd.
Yeah, going back to 105. I mean, the Western. It was I love it when a plan comes together.
Yes. So I like I said, I wanted to get back to Gideon, but I wanted to take that sidestep real quick. You mentioned earlier, Ben, about the emotional state of Gideon and that being a child, right? And Jeffrey the same way. Like, yes, huge intellect and someone that has a grasp of all of these things, but emotionally is still just a little boy. And when I interviewed Deborah, luckily it was something that I had already guessed, but I don't know if I should say this or not, but Deborah inadvertently spoiled the identity of Gideon. Now I cut it out, obviously, of the interview when I dropped it. But that said, one of the things that she said in that moment that my listeners unfortunately didn't get to hear, and I'll be able to drop it later at some point, is she talked about the, talking with James Frayne about that very fact, about like, you are a little boy, who lost his dad, right? And in this in this instance, in the scene that she was specifically talking about in The Outsider, it's like, you won the game, you won the video game, right? Like you've won. Kind of threading all that together. I mean, we never get to see Gideon specific. I mean, we do get to see him, but I also know that scene was actually technically for 213 at the end, right? Like that was not originally for As the World Burns. Is that right? When we see Gideon at the end?
Well, no. He was going to come in, but where it goes from there was originally the top of 13.
Yeah,
got it. Yeah. Okay.
And
so
we ended with, I'm in charge now.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. So, because I actually didn't get a chance to ask Drew that earlier when I was chatting with him, but all of that said, when having the shadow of that character kind of looms so large over all of this, and knowing that you are kind of crafting this origin story in so many ways for him, and that childlike quality, can you just talk about the way, Derek, for you, that this character, and knowing where Gideon was going and knowing what ultimately was going to happen, how that might have informed some of the choices that you made with Jeffrey over the course of this episode?
Yeah, I think this was sort of a building it backwards type of a situation, because it was like we weren't completely sure who Gideon Ridge was, and then what his damage was, other than it was like, we knew that it was Jeffrey connected. How does that, and so as we were figuring all this out post strike, a lot more where we really started to like dig in, saying like, oh shit, we got 5 episodes. we really need to figure some things out here that we kind of thought like, oh, it's like kicking the can down the road. Like, okay, we'll get to that. But what you never want to do is be able to like come up on the, in the 11th hour. So you're like, oh my God, we don't even know who our bad guy is, who the, antagonist is of the season and stuff. So we were again, having that time off allowed us, to sort of like when we came back in to really sort of like figure things out. And so we were like, okay, what is his damage? How does that damage happen? Oh, yeah, and it's like you said, it was Deborah saying, it's like it's a hurt little boy, a boy that's lost everything in his mind. And then finally being able to say, figure out like, and been carrying this hate and this grudge of once he knew who was responsible for it or who he believed was responsible for it. And it has informed his decision and this process to become this person who he is, when he finally reveals himself to be that person, is just, so you just have to, as you're writing that, you're figuring out, okay, what's that, walking that tightrope of like, how much, do you want to give away? How little do you want to give away? And then also, again, looking at the responsibility of like handing it off to make sure that it makes sense, in the next episode, because you only have one more episode left. And so what we don't want to do is you don't want to leave, Drew with the bag saying like, all right, good luck. There you go. Figure it out for yourself, man. You want to be able to give him enough that he can play with and figure it out, and then really sort of like, okay, what can I do with that? Right. And so, but that's again, it's like, that's all that happens in the writer's room. A lot of that is just the conversations that we're trying to figure out these last 5 episodes of like, when are we going to reveal these moments? How are we going to play this out? Where, where are you planting those seeds along the way so that it can grow in the right way versus of just making it feel like that it's coming straight out of left field. Right. It's like, sometimes that's the thing of like, whoa, what? Huh? Like it's like, who's this person? So that's, you never want to do that. So that, I think, is just, this long-winded way of saying that you just have to really sort of like look at the entire map and not just focus on like, the one moment that you're trying to tell. Like,
yeah. So speaking of looking at the entire map, and there are a couple of other specific episode-specific things that I do want to ask, but to transition to looking at the entire map, Ben, when you think back on season 2 as a whole and kind of the place that this episode certainly falls and what it does, what are some of your general thoughts just about shaping this season and being a part of doing that in the writer's room, and obviously the unique circumstances of starting up while season 1 is still technically in production, right? Then having to take this long break because of the strikes and then coming back to it maybe with a small bit of benefit, right? Because now you can see all these episodes and you can start to see what people are saying, and you're not necessarily doing this, and just how that picture has looked to you and what it's meant to you.
I think the fact that we did just go right into it at a time while we were we're literally launching a rocket at the same time that we're landing a plane, right? And the takeaway from the landing of that plane had to inform the launch of this rocket for season 2. And there were things that, I think we learned about what works, what doesn't work, and how coming into the next season, what are we going to keep? What are we going to jettison? What are we going to, what do we want to lean into? What do we want to shy away from? And I think the biggest shift was realizing that where the real sweet spot for our show is being able to have, you spent a season getting to know everybody. Now you know everybody. Now let's really dig into these people as people and make you really, really care about them, and having their emotional stakes not be the same thing as the plot stakes, right? Where you're like, okay, they have these roles that they perform for Quantum Leap, but in shifting the paradigm of Ben didn't come back when we thought he was supposed to. We thought we solved the problem. We didn't solve the problem. And now it's created a whole other set of problems, which we all now have to live with. And it changes us and it affects us. I think that was probably, one of the best decisions we could have made for story. I think, all credit to Martin and Dean for coming up with that direction for this season, because it gave us the leeway to dig deeper into the people, to marry them more to the plot of the season mythology was an emotional mythology rather than an external threat mythology.
Right. It's not about
and I
MacGuffins or
feel
smoke
like-
monsters or anything. It's about people.
Exactly. I mean, those first 8 episodes, really leaned into that. We gave Ben a new love. We had Addison have to grieve. Magic struggled with alcoholism.
Gave Addison a new love.
Gave Addison new love.
Yeah.
Introduced Tom to Quantum Leap, like changed the dynamic of home, and turned it into a real love triangle, or I guess a love quadrangle if you really think about it. Right. So maybe it's a love rhombus. Would it be a rhombus? I don't know. But in this love rhombus, we got some really great character
I hope
stories.
that doesn't stay.
Love rhombus. Now it's in your head. You can't get it out your head. The love rhombus. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like all these things that we decided to focus on made the stakes of everything that much greater, because it was, we were really rooting for these people and their situations, and I don't know, it just became a great driving force for the season. And when we got to that break and we had to stop because of the strike, when we came back, the goal became how do we really
bring the rocket back down safely.
Exactly. Bring the rocket back down in a way that we don't fucking crash the landing.
Right. The rocket has, it hit apogee, right? And it's like, well,
Yes.
okay, like how do we bring it back down without crashing and burning here, And that's the thing. But I will say this, it's like, it works. You're on the right track when we're able to break episodes. We were breaking episodes rather quickly, even though it was the rush of like, well, we got to do this in case there's going to be a strike, because we didn't know there was going to be a strike or not, because they hadn't even entered negotiations. But the looming threat of a strike, so there was a pressure of like getting these episodes out and stuff like that. But we knew it was working when the stories are coming together, when you're able to, when it feels much more effortless in the room, because it was like, we would break stories in the room and be driven by like, Alex Berger, who was like our EP in the room. And then we would all just sit down, and sometimes we can break a story within like less than a week's time. And then Martin and Dean would come in, they'd weigh in, be like this, and then, it would just click. You knew when something would click. It's like when a story didn't work, it would take longer. And then, it's like, okay, it's not working. But over the course of the season, we felt the magic of it. We felt that there was something special here that we were able to carry over from season 1 in this way. And then it was reflective of like, once the fans actually got to see the episodes, it was like, oh, okay, they also are enjoying this season. They also, paying off and stuff. So it was very important to like, okay, we got this far. We need to make sure that, again, that the rocket needs to land and not crash and burn. It's like, we need to be able to have the occupants of this rocket be able to walk safely away and have their ticker tape parade, right? It's like you want that, right? It's like, but so those last 5 episodes is like, as a whole, you're looking at it like, okay, how are we going to address these things in this amount of time? And in a perfect world, there was the hope would be that we were going to get more episodes, but because of the timing of the issue, of where we were, and it's like, it's not to knock, the studio or the network in this case. It was just a matter of like economics and time, unfortunately, and the time, the time slot that we have, it's like you're going up against all that stuff. So we were like, okay, well, we're going to have to like make sure that 13 ends in such a way that, we want to put that hook in there and like, come back for season 3, give us a season 3, come on, season 3, right? It's like, absolutely. That's but again, along the way, having having a network and a studio that's very supportive and encouraging and really, believing in what you're doing, that gives you that extra push to be able to like, okay, you want to make sure that you put your best foot forward, and we're giving it our all. to make sure that we deliver not just for ourselves and for, everybody that's working on the show, but also for the fans that actually tune in for the show to make it possible in the first place. And that's, I think that you get a bit of there's a bit of an adrenaline rush when you're like knowing when the story's working. You're like, yeah. You're like, oh, I can't wait to see how people are going to react to that. So like where it came down to, like, for this episode, with Ben and I, we're like, oh, Towering Inferno. Let's
Yeah, where did that come from? Like, what? Because I wanted to ask that, but where did the idea for that come from? I mean, just, is it something you always wanted to do?
Yeah.
No,
it's one of those things you're like, okay, what do we want to dress up Ray in this week? How do we want to make him? That's how I approach it. Is like, what cool outfit and uniform can I put him in this week that hopefully he'll have fun with, and that audiences will recognize, A, what a great actor he is, B, he can be have the opportunity to be heroic and save the day. And it's like, well, we haven't done Firefighter yet, so.
I mean, y'all have given us some pretty interesting ones, right? The Western gear, Dr. Scrubs, now Firefighter. So kudos. Going back to the episode, and one of my favorite scenes, and we kind of started off talking a bit about that Hannah and Addison scene, which is lovely. But of course, is the Ben and Hannah goodbye scene, or what we think at the time of this episode is going to be their goodbye. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. And obviously Eliza is remarkable in the scene. One of the other things that immediately affected me is the score. Daniel James Chen's score is lovely. Has been every time we see Addison, but here it just is, even more kind of elegiac in a way. And then, of course, the flashbacks. And we talked about collaboration a bit, but when you get the fusion of all of that working together, and the way that they're just the choice of the scenes, the way that they're edited in, Hannah's lines, I would love to just hear about that scene and the crafting of that scene, and then being on set, seeing it realized finally. Like, Ben, can you kind of take us through that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a lot of pressure to deliver something big and emotional at the very end of this season-long romance. Our impulse was for Hannah to be able to say thank you for, the gift that Ben gave her, at the same time that she's giving him a gift in return. Like having him realize that what he's done for her is not lost on her, and has moved her in a way that she never would have imagined. And that, because of that, I have a life that I never would have had you not come into my diner. And now I do. And because of you, I want to give that gift in return. A fun fact about the post of it all was that those flashback scenes were not originally in there. That was a decision that Martin made in post, and very wisely and beautifully, to have us relive some of those moments throughout. I mean, and I'm talking about like all the flashbacks that you see in the episode.
Yeah, that came out in a conversation. And watching Martin, he's like, magician. Like, you're sitting there and he's working with the editors, and he's like saying like, yeah, punch in on this, do this, stretch out this. And it's like, boop, 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 boop. And then the editor, like, they do it. And then you're like, oh, that actually works. It was fun for us because, part of the part that, there's the three stages of sort of like you're writing the script, and then you're writing when you're shooting, and then the writing also is happening in post. And for the most part, Ben and I, it's like it's rare when you're on a show when you get to have that experience of being able to really be in post and be a part of that. And it shouldn't be a rarity, because like all writers should learn how to be a part of that. And Martin being very supportive of the writers and believing like, no, because like someday you're going to run your own show, you're going to need to know how to do this. And so he wants to make sure that every writer gets to have that experience of not just being on set, but also understanding how it works in post as well, if there's time given, And so in this place, there was time for us to be a part of that, sit down, and and again, when sometimes like if you're running under, then it's like, okay, how do you make it so that the episode is going to be able to deliver on time, and so there's little tricks and moments and stuff like that. And in this case, it was a trick as well as an actual reason for that moment to be there. So for these flashbacks, because it just has that emotional gut punch that it was just that extra bit of that oomph of like, oh, hits you right where, if you especially if you've been following them on this journey to see it all sort of play out.
Yeah. I mean, I have been known at times to be a bit of a crier, and I will certainly say that over the course of these 2 episodes, there were certainly a lot of tears, and I think again, just kind of going back to speaking to the season as a whole, I mean, so much stuff was built so beautifully and then capitalized on, and that's not even the right word. I mean, that almost seems like it's some sort of economics lesson, but the payoffs that we received because of the emotional depth of these characters and the way that it had grown over the course of the season was so moving and satisfying in some instances. And I think that this goodbye scene between Ben and Hannah, it really played to all of those strengths really, really beautifully, and I was definitely moved by it. And again, it was one of those things where I bought into, that is the last time we're ever going to see them together, right? And that the finale is going to go off in a different direction or whatever. And I'm grateful for the scene that we did get with Hannah in Against Time, obviously, but it didn't feel it. There was nothing about this that kind of felt like, oh, don't worry, you're going to see her again. It definitely had that finality to it, so it worked really, really well.
It was fun being fun. I mean, it was being on set for that scene. Like, you're sitting in the village, you're watching, these 2 amazing actors say these words, making them sound better than you ever would have imagined that you put on page, and you just sort of get lost. Like, you get sucked into the monitor. Like, oh, right, that was great. That's great. Right, that's not really happening. They're just acting. But it was very gratifying.
But again, it's all earned. I mean, even like in the moment of the episode, the Outsider, right, where Ben is working with the reporter, and he takes that moment to go to the payphone and he tries to call Hannah, right, and again, that moment would not work if you hadn't earned it from the previous times that they've been together. And you're rooting for these 2, but understanding that there is a ticking clock on these 2. It's just the nature of like where it is. But you just and you're hoping like, okay, how is this going to end? How's this going to play out? And so for that moment, for Ray and Eliza to really sort of like just like bring it home, in a way that you just hope can that you're it's not it's not like a lack of confidence in the 2 of them, because that they're going to deliver because they're just so fantastic, but you just never know until you're actually in that moment. Like as Ben was saying, you're just getting captivated, like, come on, let's see this, and then you're like, whoa. And then when it's all cut together and you're watching this, these 2 episodes together, like you're saying, is like there was moments where I would just all of a sudden I was sort of like, I ain't gonna cry, but
well, I definitely got choked up in 13. There were a couple moments.
Yeah.
Like, God damn it,
Yeah. Speaking of, it's also contrasted with this scene with Jeffrey, and there's not really any dialogue there, right? Like he's just sitting there reading the letter. And again, what a home run from Wyatt, because I think it's so beautifully played.
It's like you're watching Damien being born in that moment.
Yeah. Okay. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because at the end of 212, I texted Drew, and I was, because I took a little break, and I texted Drew and I was like, I think Gideon, there might be some redeemable qualities to him. Okay. There just might be. And then I'm watching 213, and there's the scene between Ben and Gideon at the racetrack, and I text Drew and I'm like, nah, he's Satan. Because it was just like the way that James like really turned that on, and that scene was written, it was lovely. But no, the question I wanted to ask about the letter is like the choice to have him read the letter at that point. You talked just a little bit about it earlier, but I would love to hear specifically like what went into kind of creating that moment. And Ben, I'll go ahead and throw that to you.
Well, I mean, how are we going to get it across? What was the thing that was sort of going to be the
Yeah.
punctuation on the sentence? And again, the fact that he had to leave all his father's stuff behind, right? None of that shit. I mean, he could have taken one or two other items maybe, but it's not as portable as something you can stick in your pocket, carry with you, and and unveil at the very end. So that it felt like the most organic thing to survive the fire, but also the most necessary thing to have survive the fire because it tells the tale, because it answers any question he would have had is tied up in that letter, and it all falls into place because of it.
And also, look, we're a time travel show, so you gotta you can't have fun moments like this. What are you doing? Like, why it's like what type of show are you doing if you can't have a fun moment like this, right? It's like we back to the nod to Doc Brown and Marty McFly. It's like it's like you want to have those type of fun moments, and it was, but in such a way that is also sort of like revealing. Again, it was not just for the sake of it just being the moment. It's like, okay, if you're going to do this, like, what is it? What's this going to lead to, and the domino effect of that, right? And again, the consequences of time travel, and so and also the sort of like where he was able to, where he thought he was saving, Jeffrey's father's life, right? And then is like, but then couldn't save him. Prolonged his life a little bit, but ultimately he still died. Then like what's going to be the ripple effect of this? And we're seeing that play out in sort of that real time, because it's like that's the benefit of being a two-parter is you see that moment where he is becoming Damien, is like where and then all of a sudden he steps into the QL headquarters and is like, oh shit, this is the same dude. This is it, and revealing that's fun. That's part of the fun.
Absolutely. Of well, it's funny because one of the things that I had mentioned to someone after what was Drew after I saw 210 is I immediately thought about like, what if somebody else gets that letter instead of Hannah, and my thought was like, Josh is going to read that letter. And then, and obviously like in 213, we do see that is one of the things that happens, but at the end of this episode, seeing Jeffrey read it, I was just like, oh no, Josh isn't going to read it. It's going to be Jeffrey. Oh no. And it's just such a big moment. And kind of to your point too, Derek, it's something that you can really only do in a show like this, right? And it was great. And because the other thing is that it just struck like this very human chord too. Like, oh my God, imagine if you are that kid reading that letter. Like, holy shit, like that is going to absolutely warp your worldview in so many ways. And then you look over and you see your mom and this firefighter. It's like, what is happening? So I would love to, as we kind of get ready to wrap up, I would love to ask you both about Against Time as well, because again, you get the opportunity, you set these things up, and here you are, the penultimate episode, and now here comes the finale. And being in the writers' room, obviously you're involved, what's going on, you're contributing and that sort of stuff. But to see this finale realized and to see season 2 brought home, what were your all's feelings? Derek, I'll start with you.
Surprise. because it was like there were moments that we didn't know were going to happen, because once we broke our episode and then we had to write the episode, we're not in the room as much, and so we're keeping tabs on everything that's going on. And again, we know the bigger things again of like the Addison of it and the Gideon connection, and and the Ben, but we didn't know there was a lot of stuff that happened in there that we weren't privy to, because we were just busy working on our episode. Make sure we get, again, making sure that we get our part right. And so, I would say honestly, there was surprise when, you'd see the notes or you see, the beat sheet or outline or the script for that matter. And you're like, oh, what happened here? It's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Like, oh, yeah. Jen, oh, damn. It's like, Magic's back. Oh, stuff like that. And like, so there again, it was just like, so that was kind of fun, and just sort of like the surprise of it. Then Drew just really also, again, like Drew had, he knew exactly what he wanted to tell and how to, to do it. And I think that's the other thing that's fun about it, is that a lot of it, where we break stuff in the room, but a lot of times it's because the encouragement is like, this is your episode, this is your story, this is, so, really figure out as much as possible, take ownership of that, and really, then come into the room and say, like, okay, now all of us together in the collaborative media of taking all the best ideas, and really sort of like figuring out the episode itself and stuff. But there's, yeah, for me, I won't speak for Ben. I think it was just more a lot of it was just like the fun little surprises that I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah. I love that. I love so much about what you just said, because obviously, the collaborative spirit is there, but also the supportiveness of that, the idea that it's just like, okay, now go hit your home run, in addition to like, yeah, that you're collaborating at first, right? And then it's just sort of like, all right, now I can't wait to see what you do. I have to ask you real quick, Derek, and then I want to hear your thoughts, Ben, but I have to ask you real quick, because in one of in our very first conversation, when we were talking about the classic series, like, you identified yourself as a big fan of the classic series and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing Janice, seeing Beth, and having that scene where, we get that confirmation that Beth has always known everything, right? Like, she knew.
Yeah.
I mean,
it made perfect sense. And again, it's just like it's such a nice, a compliment again of like the strength of the original series, and, and the spirit of it, right? Again, we don't have Dean Stockwell, but we do have Al's family being a part of this, and then we were able to establish them early on, and again, and then really integrate them, integrate them in such a way of like, Beth being, involved with magic and having this new relationship with magic. And so it was just sort of the idea of bringing it all home, and then also, the cherry on top is like bringing back Ziggy. Like, the actual handling, it's like, that's my phone case, like, it's like,
and yes, and that
uh
music.
yeah, and the music, all that, this again, you're talking about, if there's a love letter, and if there's really sort of like a way to say like, this is Quantum Leap, through and through. It's, I think that's, that's really sort of like a nice moment right there and stuff, like you're saying, of all the hard work that everybody has brought together, and including from the original series, and again, of like just really respecting the fans that also, have been on that journey in such a way that, it's like we hear you, and it's like again, wouldn't be possible without your love and support for this. And I think that's and again, to the shout out to to Deborah again for carrying that torch, making sure that torch is passed along in such a way, and being a part of it. So I think, if anything, it's just for, like you said, as a fan of the original, being able to see that and be a part of that, and just, it is sometimes that pinch me moment of like, oh yeah, I'm actually a part of this tapestry, and it's fun. So.
Yeah, nice. Ben, what are your thoughts on Against Time, and kind of just bringing it all home at the end of the season?
I mean, echoing all that, and all the little Easter eggs, and the opportunities to sort of tie it into reminding the audiences that we are a sequel, not a reboot, I think was great. But selfishly, we are the ones that got to push this rock up the hill. We are the ones that made the reappearance of Janice and Beth, worth it for the finale. It well, kind of to my point earlier about earning it. And I think this show worked really hard to earn the audience's respect, and acknowledge that we are, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and taking it in a new direction, and to be able to tell a story that once again changes the paradigm of what Quantum Leap is with our ending, is incredibly gratifying. And knowing that we put the work into making that ending possible, making it matter, hopefully making it emotional for those who will see it as such. And
Also
it's
making
working
it
really
such a
good.
fun surprise, right? Like,
Right. To be entertained by all of it. Like we
yeah.
hope we have entertained everyone in what we've done, and we've entertained ourselves. We are very satisfied, I think, with what we've done. We feel really good about it. We hope audiences will too, but we want everyone to have fun and have a good time, and recognize that Quantum Leap is sort of this bright shining star in the television firmament that for the past 2 seasons has gotten to shine again, and shine in brighter and different ways. That let's keep it shining.
There's nothing else like it on TV. I used to hedge my bets with that. I said this earlier when I was talking to Dean and Drew, and I used to say, like, oh, there's nothing else like it on network TV, right? Because that's an easy thing to say, and it's pretty true. But I mean, I think it's gone so far beyond that. There's just literally nothing on the landscape of television anywhere like this show, and I feel like it is incredibly necessary, and it's so beautiful to see the ways that it is grown and changed, and the moments that you all have earned, as you said, because they have definitely been earned. Do y'all have some stories in mind that you want to tell with Ben and Addison leaping around as a duo?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course we do.
I think that the obviously being able to be entertained by it all, and be moved by it all, and see the way that these stories of loss and grief and sacrifice and fate, while also finding the hope in all of that, have been incredibly meaningful, for a lot of people. And I think that, for those of us in this community, who were, close to Matt Dale, the way that the story is played out over these past 5 episodes, has obviously hit very close to home, and in some incredible ways. I know that both of you obviously had the opportunity to speak with Matt. Can you talk a little bit about, what Matt might have meant to this process, and even to you and your interactions with him? Because it's been something, obviously, it's been on my mind a lot, over these past 8 weeks or so. Ben, I'll go and start with you.
We don't take for granted what this show means to fans like Matt and yourself, who don't just sit and watch it for an hour on television, who decide to then go out into the world and sort of spread the gospel of Quantum Leap in ways that are that are meaningful and relevant to you in your life, and because you've been affected by it, because you've been moved by it, because he was moved by it. It's so rare to find people like that respond to what others call content. To know that it's not just content. It is these are myths and legends and stories and adventures, and they're things that make your world and your life a little bit better for a little while over the course of a day, and in the best instances incite you to want to do the same yourself. And I think that's something that Matt did with the Quantum Leap podcast, that you do with yours, is you, in talking about it and showing your love and your passion for it, you're putting something good out there. You may not be Ben Song right, or Sam Beckett, sitting right when once went wrong, but you are definitely, and he definitely, gave other people something to latch onto that will maybe make their lives a little bit brighter, like it made his brighter. And I'm sad, even though we only got to speak to him that one time. It was a great conversation, and I'm really sad that he didn't get to sort of see the ending of this season. If I had a wish for him, it would have been that and for his family, that obviously that he's still here with them. That's the real sadness of it all. And I wish someone like Ben Song or Sam Beckett could go back in time and undo this. Sadly, that's not possible, but immense gratitude for him and everything he ever did for Quantum Leap.
Yeah. Derek?
Yeah, everything that Ben said is, far more eloquent than what I would say. I will just add, it's like, for both Ben and myself, it's like, yeah, we're lucky enough to do this, and but we also we start out as fans, and I think maybe in another life, Or who knows, maybe like I'm not saying not, it's like Ben's already got his own podcast going, so it's
I
like,
was gonna get to that.
you know, it's like so the thing about it with Matt is just the unbridled enthusiasm and love for a show, love for like everything reflected. Look at your back wall there. It's like all the movies that you have and TV shows, and and finding people that genuinely are passionate about storytelling, performances, and just really just like fun shows, and shows like Quantum Leap. It's just always such a fun part of the experience of being able to talk to somebody like that, right? And Matt had that unbound enthusiasm, which was just this always so nice to sit down and talk, just like yourself, and and it's just like, and it stings so much more when it's so unexpectedly you lose someone. Not to say that it's ever you know a bed of roses, for when someone passes away, but when it's unexpected, like the last thing, and all of a sudden you hit that news, and that sort of that moment of gut punch of like, oh, and your heart goes out to the family, and then again the friends that knew him, that really spent time with him. It's just so, as Ben was saying, it's like, wow, we might have had just that momentary, that moment of interaction with them. Grateful and appreciative of that, and and it's like, wish you could have more. But it's also just reflective again of like, you just never know if you're going to have another moment like that. So appreciate the moments that you do have. So thank you, Sam, for always inviting us and letting us be a part of this. And the same way that Matt also, extended that, and anyone else for that matter. And it's just, we don't take that for granted. I think that's the thing. And I think Matt also was a person that recognized that anytime that he had anybody on, to talk. And it is just like, so I think, if anything again, it's just like, I just appreciate the moment that I got to spend with him, and the time, and wish could have had more. And it's just like, and the only thing that you can do is just like in honor of his memory, of like, just keep sharing these stories, and keep being able to interact with other people, and and hopefully be able to spread that enthusiasm, that love, in that way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and he certainly touched my life, and I'm so grateful. I got to give a shout out to Georgina Riley, actually, because Georgina and I were supposed to have an interview the day after I found out that Matt had passed. The day after Matt had passed, and I remember emailing her and saying, hey, I don't know if we should do this. I don't know. And, and she encouraged me to do it, and was like, no, this is what we should do. This is, this is a way, what better way to honor Matt than to do something that he would have loved doing. And I'm grateful for that. And, and as I was talking to her, I just realized how much of an inspiration Matt was, and this thing that I kind of started doing. And I think I'd actually done it with Eliza when she was on the show the second time beforehand, but it's taken on new meaning for me, and I've loved the responses that I get so much. So I have to ask you, Deric, I'll start with you. What inspires you?
These days, not much. No, just kidding.
Well, you definitely get the award for funniest answer so far.
I mean, have you seen what's going on in the world? Honestly, what inspires me is that I'm able to wake up and do this for a living. It's like, I think that's inspiration, because, and again, it's like moments like this of being able to talk to people that are, that get to, get to share these moments, and really appreciate what we do, what Ben and I do. It's like every day, I always tell my friends, is like, no matter how much shit that gets shoveled our way, that all the trials and tribulations, at the end of the day, I still am just like in awe, and and I get inspired that I get to do this for a living. Like, I get to I get to be able to tell stories, and just be able to live in these worlds in a way that normally, I don't know if it was like, another life, it would be, I'd still probably be living in these worlds, but only in my head, and not being able to do this. Like, so I don't know, if that, it's like, so I think if there's any inspiration, is just being able to know that every day I'm able to get up and do that. even on the days that I don't want to do that, I'm like, it's still like I said, I call it, my procrastinating days. It's like, and I think that it is the inspiration of just being. I think what you're saying about being involved in this show, and we're being able to work with all the people that I get to work with, and actually become friends, and have good colleagues and relationships. I think that, again, that's inspiring, because then it's just like, okay, I know that I'm on the right path of like what I've always wanted to do. And just also, and it's like, don't want him to, hopefully, he's looks like he's frozen. So, it's like Ben inspires me, except
Come on.
all right, he partially inspires me. He can't handle the full inspiration. He can't do that. That's
he's just not equipped emotionally to handle.
Right, he's not equipped emotionally for my JJK fans. It's like my domain expansion of inspiration. It's like he can't handle
that. Ben, what inspires you?
Well, I guess Deric inspires me.
See, now I know he's lying. I know he's lying.
No. Listen, there's a lot of people that inspire me, and Deric is definitely counted among them. Yeah. I have my family that inspires me. I have my wife, my kids. They're the thing that gets me up every day and doing what I do and wanting to do it, and be better at it, and be the best I can possibly be. And I know that is, that is a mountain that I will climb until the day I die, because there is no peak for it. There is, only the striving to be better in all things, to be a better person, to be a better writer, to be a better friend, to be a better, whatever I can be in this world before I'm out of it, to do that. And there are people I look up to, and there are, whose achievements I aspire to reach. There are people who, just by the goodness of their heart, make me go, I really wish I had that in me. And I need to try and find it. So for me, inspiration comes from this desire and this drive to want to be better.
I love that. And yeah, I thank you both so much for answering that question. Now, before we get out of here, I do have one last question, because I know that you all have a lot on your plate, but I'm going to start with you, Ben. You've started a podcast and you didn't let me know? What? No. What are we talking about? Seriously, yeah.
You didn't let me know, man. Sam, you're not the only one. He didn't let me know.
Tell us about your podcast.
What are we talking about? We don't know until you know. Something myself and my friend Paul, who's another writer, producer, and our friend Mitch, who's a TV executive. We're just friends in real life, and we hang out. And one night we were hanging out and talking, and just over drinks and everything. And invariably, some topic would come up where 2 out of the 3 of us would be knowing what we're talking about, and the third person would be, what are we talking about? And so it just kind of became this, like, we realized this recurring theme in our socialization, that we have these moments. So we decided to, Paul had the podcasting equipment. We had some free time. We said, let's do it. Let's sit together and let's talk. We we've written little topics on slips of paper. We fold them up. We put them in this popcorn bowl. We someone pulls it out, and that becomes the topic of conversation for the week. And so our 3rd episode just went live today. We are on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify, Audible, iTunes, iHeartRadio. We're all over the place. So please listen in, subscribe, review, follow us on socials. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. We're everywhere. You want to know what we're talking about?
I love it. That's fantastic. I have been so busy lately that I haven't had a chance to listen, but I have it queued up, and luckily I have a couple long drives tomorrow, so I might get to listen to episode 1 for the first time.
Even did the music. We are not professionals.
Have you seen my setup? Like,
no, but we're not video. We're just audio. So all you have is to listen to us. There's nothing to look at. It's like,
well, I mean, depending on who's watching, they might be grateful for that. I don't know. You never can tell. At least with me, I don't know. I mean, but No,
You are
that's
magic.
fantastic. I'm glad. Oh, that's very sweet, actually. Deric, what about you? What else have you got going on?
This is it.
This is it. This is it.
I just jump on people's podcasts, bitch and complain, and then watch TV and eat. I got to
Well,
eat.
I mean, look, I think everyone should follow you on Instagram, because I think that you post some hilarious stuff sometimes, and some stuff that I can deeply identify with on occasion as well. So so at least there's that, like, if nothing else.
I mean, no, most part is like, it's like while we await to see if we get a third season or not, Ben and I are just busy working on our other projects and stuff. We got other stuff coming up, got a comic book coming out later on this year. We have, we keep swimming. It's like Dory. We gotta keep swimming. And so,
absolutely.
so we're always just working on stuff. Like right now, as soon as we jump off, I'll be driving right back into something else that we're working on, like on a feature stuff. Like we got 2 feature ideas that we're kicking about. So it's just, that's where, and then the other part of my time is just, like I said, either parked in front of the TV, or maybe I'll just go out every now and then, but mostly to eat. that's the excitement in my life right now. I got nothing else to share at this point in time.
Well, no, I'm glad you shared everything that you did, especially the comic book. I mean, I'm a comic book guy, so I'm looking forward to that. And I think that one of the great joys that takeaways from this show for me has not only been getting to meet and interact with people like yourselves, but also it's turned me into fans of more people. And no matter what you're doing, like I want to tune in. I want to see what's going on, and I really appreciate that, because in that effort to spread a little joy, right, and to spread a little kindness, and to share a little something with other people, when you find people that you can kind of connect with on that level alone, and just say, like, I want to follow their work, it's pretty cool. And that's one of the things that the show has definitely done. So I'm grateful for the pair of you, not just for coming on the show and talking with me. I always have a blast when you do that. It's always so much fun. But just for your work, and specifically, to As the World Burns, I just think it's fantastic. I really genuinely do. And I'm just thrilled for people to see it. I can't wait to hear what other people are thinking about it as well. So to that, if you're watching this, if you're listening, leave a comment, join the conversation. Let us know what you're thinking about it, because I thought it was great. And I can't wait to do this again at some point in the future, whatever we're talking about.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So, Deric, thank you so very much. Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
That's luck with those deadlines.
Yeah, right. Well, in the spirit of those deadlines, hey, thank you so much, fellow travelers, for tuning in. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Stay safe out there. And remember to always, always leap responsibly.